Hello everyone, welcome to Rainmaker's Roundup. I am your host, Mark Iorio. I've got Jim Lee with me today. Jim is the founder and CEO of StratFi. Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the program.
You betcha.
I am so excited about talking to you about investing and the looking forward, right? Looking forward in the future of investing, Jim. It's a fascinating subject, and I really want to talk to you about how you kind of got to this point. You got a pretty fascinating background with your dad as a, he was a scientist, right? And then here you are you graduate from William and Mary, and you've always had this interest in investing.
Yeah. So how that all sort of happened, as you mentioned, my dad was a scientist. He was an optical physicist, so he built things like optical switches, he built early barcode scanners, he built digital radiography. My mother came from a banking family, 100 years at Chase Manhattan.
Wow.
So you put the two together, and I'm kind of like the Frankenstein of finance. I'm doing experiments in the lab, trying to figure out what happens next, what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. When you look at the future of investing, right? A lot of people who have been in the investment community for a long time, financial advisors, they get research, right? It's forward-thinking research, a little bit of history, but you're looking at investing 5-10 years down the road, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So tell me about that. What's the excitement behind that, Jim? That sort of drives you.
Well, the general idea is that if you want to be in the right place at the right time, that it's helpful to be a little early.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Certain tools work with certain time frames.
Yeah.
I have a graduate degree in Foresight from the University of Houston, and that's really all about the big picture, and that's about finding the big opportunities over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Then after that, if you're looking sort of in the midterm, between like 3 months to 3 years, you need to be able to crunch the numbers.
Right.
And that's where financial analysis comes in.
Right.
And then inside of that, you don't get a lot of information between corporate earnings reports, which come out quarterly.
Yeah.
Inside of that, you need to look at sentiment. You need to look at how people feel about things.
Yeah.
And
When you talk to your clients, and investing value investing is a slow game. I mean, it takes a long time. It's not the quick fix. It's not the quick home runs that people are looking.
Patience.
It does take patience. How do you convince your clients that, it's going to take time? I see this on the horizon. This is going to happen down the road, whether it's technology, whether it's energy, whether it's, whatever, digitization, whatever it might be, Jim. It's going to take time. How do you convince them that requires patience?
Well, that's sort of the thing. I mean, you want to be at the right place at the right time, but if you show up too early to the party, you're going to be the only one in the room, and that's not a lot of fun either.
Yeah, true.
So you have to be able to sort of figure out when the party's about ready to get started, and that's when you want to show up.
Yeah. That's pretty funny you say that. You don't want to be there too early. You're the only one at the party. I remember. It's not a great story because I invested in Barnes & Noble when Amazon and Barnes & Noble were competing.
That was the thing. Yes.
Yeah, so it's Barnes & Noble or Amazon, and guess what I picked? The wrong one. But it was early in the process. Really, I think you looked at, no one really thought about e-commerce as Amazon sort of constructed that back then. Right. Right? And you look at the future in terms of what could possibly happen. What are the future areas that you focus on at this point? Looking down the road. Is it technology? Is it energy?
Sure.
Is it a bunch of those things?
Yeah. So we look at what are called steep trends: social, technological, economic, ecological, and political.
Okay.
Okay. And out of that, you can sort of figure out, what the big themes are. Right. And what I write about in my book, first of all, I talk about aging demographics, which is pretty easy to forecast. We kind of know, where that's going.
Yep.
Look at alternative and new sources of energy storage, generation, and transmission. We look at automation, digitization, urbanization, and also a new area that I refer to as tiny tech.
Tiny tech. So is that including the Internet of Things, or is it nanotechnology? Is it a whole bunch of those things?
Yeah. So if you look at what we've been doing with software and digitalization, we've learned how to write programs and systems to make decisions and do things. And if you apply that to the physical world, okay, you have nanotechnology.
Right.
And that term was used a lot 10 to 20 years ago, and then what we realized that nanotechnology has been with us for billions of years. We call it life.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's evolved in a very refined fashion, and we're just beginning to understand that.
Yeah. You talked about storage a minute ago, and I look at a couple things there, Jim. Data storage, number one, right?
Big,
because we're continually producing content, right? So we've got this
all the time,
right? This massive data that we need to store. But the one thing that I really am intrigued by is where is the storage for renewable energy going? Right, the technology, Jim. Right, the technology is not yet there to take a solar array or wind power or even hydropower and store that energy so that it can be used elsewhere. So the big thing that I think you're probably looking at in that sort of realm would be storage, right, for energy.
It is, and that makes energy more resilient. And if you looked at what happened last year in Texas, for example, they didn't have the infrastructure to deal with the power surges. And if you look at how renewable energy works, either with wind or with solar, it tends to create very volatile inflows into the system. So one of my better investments last year was Generac, which was really a play on system instability.
Of course.
And, we had the California wildfires, we had, Texas freezing over. Generac just exploded in this context, and they're looking at storage as well. Battery technology takes a long time to develop because you have to go through a lot of charge, a lot of discharge cycles. In terms of utility scale storage, you need to look at something called flow batteries, which are these ginormous batteries in large tanks, which enable you to store power at that scale.
Yeah, and so, this is the stuff that gets really interesting because it's not just the battery, it's the product that goes into it, right? The natural resources that go into building that battery, right? Lithium and other
supply chain,
right? So you start to look at all that, and that's the thing that's fascinating about what you do. So, you're looking at the future, but it's so many things within those subjects.
It's complicated.
It is.
And, my book was sort of my COVID project. You sort of lock yourself up. You have a year. You're like, well, where are we going to come out of this?
Right.
And if you think about it, investing is really a multidisciplinary practice. Right? You need to know your history.
Absolutely.
You need to know your psychology, your math, your politics. A little science certainly doesn't hurt.
Absolutely.
And you sort of put it all together, and you need to be sort of conversant in a lot of different things.
Emotional intelligence is incredibly important. I mean, a high IQ is obviously important, but to have an EQ that's, very high, to understand how people work and everything is important. You mentioned your book a couple times, Foresight Investing. By James H. Lee. This is a complete guide to finding your next great trade. Tell us a little bit about the book, but I also want you to tell us about StratFi and how you came about, forming that organization.
Sure, yeah. So StratFi is a boutique investment advisory firm focused on what happens next. So
surprise.
Instead of figuring out what worked well over the last 5 or 10 years, we sort of figured out what the new thing is. And then position our clients accordingly for that. Foresight Investing took me 5 years to write.
Wow.
And when COVID hit, I had a choice of either finishing the book or starting a drinking habit. You sort of think about it, and you're like, I'm going to finish the book, And that's what I did. Feels good, chose wisely.
And it's healthier too.
It is. But the world changed as I was writing the book, and that's part of what made it challenging. For example, I thought urbanization was a slam dunk in terms of forecasts. It's been going on for 12,000 years.
Good point.
And here we are last year, some mass migration out of the major urban centers. What does that look like? What do urban centers look like in a post-COVID world? So you sort of have to think on your feet in some cases.
Yeah. You dedicated the book to your lovely wife, Stephanie, and tell us about that process. And when you're writing a book, Jim, I'd like you to tell the audience how difficult it is when you sort of have to bury yourself in a room and start to think about what you want to write, and it takes dedication and support from a family.
Yeah, it does, and she was very patient with me, and she read my early drafts and sort of helped me through some of the medical pieces on this. She's a physician. She's actually a COVID doctor.
Oh, wow.
So she's been working, super hard with that as well. And really involves just kind of submersing yourself in the material, letting it percolate a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's like you just download information. You figure out how it all fits together.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of note-taking.
Good. Yeah. It looks. I've taken on twice now the thought of writing a book, and I get about a chapter into it, and you need to be focused. You really need to be disciplined, right?
It's funny when you mention that, because I found that my most productive writing happens around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because at that point I'm too tired to procrastinate.
Yeah,
and I just kind of sit down and it's like, I can't do anything else. I might just work on the book.
I can pour myself a bourbon, or I can write this book. Let me write the book.
I'm already sitting here. Let's
start. So, what can people expect out of Foresight Investing?
I think this book may be the last book about investing that you'll ever need. Okay.
Wow.
So it gets all the bases covered. One, from the big trends over the next 10 years. To how to read an earnings statement, to looking at the charts, and then understanding the patterns.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the patterns part is really interesting, because if you understand the patterns, the rhythms, the sequences of events, then you know what happens next.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. What do you think, or when you've been doing this a long time, right? You've been in investment business for a long time. What are some of the bigger mistakes that people make, in investing, in your opinion?
Yeah, I would say people don't spend enough time figuring out when to get out, when to sell.
Yeah.
And when you watch the news, you read the newspaper, everyone talks about what to buy.
Right.
That's the easy decision. That's kind of like falling in love.
Yeah.
And selling is kind of like breaking up.
Yeah.
You're either paying taxes or you're admitting defeat.
Right.
Nobody likes talking about
that. Exactly. Yeah. You're
Mm-hmm.
right. Yeah, it's amazing. If you try to take the emotion out of the investment, you have to.
You do.
You can start.
You'll sleep better too.
You'll sleep better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be able to sell a little bit more quickly. Yeah. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back after more with Jim Lee talking about StratFi, the book, Foresight Investing, and what to look forward to next in the world of investment. We'll be right back after this message from our sponsor.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Welcome back to Rainmaker's Roundup. I am your host, Mark Iorio, and I have Jim Lee with me today. Jim is the founder of StratFi, which is a boutique investment firm down in Wilmington, Delaware, looking at the future of investing. And Jim just finished Foresight Investing, a complete guide to finding your next great trade, dedicated to Stephanie. I like that.
My wife,
That's
yeah.
good stuff, Stephanie. Yeah. So we were talking at the break, Jim, about about some of the things the trends that you look forward to, right, going forward. And there are, you said it's complex. And it is, because there's so many little nuances that people don't think about when, they think about, the future of investing. What is renewable energy? And what are the things that can happen? What are the businesses that support renewable energy that you might want to invest in that could be part of that future, right?
Right.
How do you've got a researcher's mind.
Sure.
Right, you do.
Sure.
How do you go back and look at all those things that really help set up that future?
Yeah, so what you got to do is you got to map out the players and the stakeholders, and then you start connecting the dots in forming clusters. Okay?
Yeah.
And
that must be fun.
It is kind of fun.
That is fun.
Yeah, it is kind of fun. And then once you do that, you look at how the different pieces interact together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool stuff, because, a lot of people say, well, I want to invest in renewable energy. Well, what does that even mean? And before the break, you said, if you read the newsprint or you read social media, if you get on Reddit and you invest, a lot of people talk about what to invest in, what to buy.
They do,
right? Rarely do you hear you got to sell this, or you better sell this.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. How do you get out?
How do you get out? And how do you do that? How do you convince your clients to, it's time to get out? We've taken our profit. We're going to pay some tax on that, or if it's a non-taxable account, we just have to get out of that.
Yeah. Well, two mistakes that people make. One is that they sell out of their winners, and if something's working for you, it's okay to keep riding that as it continues to go up, and then just peel off little bits and pieces as you need it, to rebalance and that kind of thing. The other thing is that people tend to hold on to their losses too long. They expect them to come back, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You either lose money or you end up tying it up for longer than it should be, when it could be working harder somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? So usually for me, if I have a 20% loss in an individual stock and the market's flat, let's say, and I'm going to say, hey, do I really believe in this? Am I going to double down on this investment? Or am I going to stop the bleeding?
Right.
Or am I going to cut my losses short?
Right.
Because there's something better to do somewhere else.
Yeah.
And if you use like a 20 to 30% rule on that, and you make it less of an emotional decision, it becomes a much easier decision to make.
And that's why people clients need to use firms like yours, Jim, because you get them to take the emotion out of the investment.
It's helpful to work with someone on that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, a lot of times, you look at, people think that, there are different asset classes out there, right? A home is not
an investment.
An investment, okay?
It's something you live in. Yeah,
it's something you live in. So, if you're going to buy a stock or a bond or a commodity or a cryptocurrency or something like that, yes, they're speculative in some cases.
Yeah.
But they're investments. And you have to think intellectually about those investments versus emotionally about those investments.
Right.
And for them, the client to use a company like StratFi, it helps because you're out there, you're the professional, and you're the one that says, look, it's time to punt. It's time to get out of this, right?
Yeah, well, I spent the first 20 years of my career figuring out the rules.
Yeah.
And then the most recent 10 years figuring out that the rules don't always work.
The rules change.
Well, yeah, the rules change. They don't tell you what the rules are necessarily.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you have to use different sets of rules.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of figuring out which game you're playing.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you have such passion about doing what you do? What is the motivation when your feet hit the floor in the morning to help your clients and do what you're doing here?
Part of it's just curiosity.
Yeah.
I just kind of wonder what's going to happen next. And part of it's sort of looking at the future and realizing that it's not entirely unknowable.
Yeah.
Strategic foresight is really all about using what we know about the future to make better decisions today.
Right. Yeah. And as you when you find clients, what is the so if you were to go out there and you were like a fly on the wall, what are people saying about StratFi and Jim Lee?
I don't know.
You should know, Jim. You need to know.
He's crazy.
No, he's not crazy.
Loose cannon, any number of things, really.
He drinks? No, he writes books.
But, I've been really fortunate in that I've been able to create a really unique niche. I'm Delaware's only professional futurist. And that's opened up a lot of doors for me, and the community's been very interested in that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you do some speaking? Before the pandemic, have you gone out and have done speaking engagements?
Yeah, still do speaking. Obviously, a lot of Zoom time these days.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting out in the world again. So,
yeah. Well, tell me what you would do if you were to be. Let's say you're sitting here talking to a younger Jim Lee, not that much younger, but let's say 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah. Right.
What advice would you give to a younger person coming into the business?
Yeah, that was actually what my book was about.
Yeah.
Foresight Investing is the book that I wanted 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I'm kind of writing it to a younger version of myself.
Yeah.
Now, if I was in my 20s now, I would be deep into cryptocurrency. I would be looking at blockchain technologies, and I would be looking at decentralized finance or DeFi, because that is a big opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'd say it's a generational opportunity if it comes out okay. As far as Bitcoin's concerned, or Ethereum, or Cardano, or some of the other platforms, I look at crypto as going through sort of this awkward adolescence, where it's no longer this bright, shiny new thing, that's just adorable. But it's not grown up yet either. So you give the 15 or 16-year-old responsibilities like shoveling your sidewalk or mowing the yard, but they're not going to be doing your company finances.
Right.
It's in college now, and provided that it doesn't flunk out of college, in 1 to 2 years, Bitcoin, more specifically Ethereum, Cardano, or some of the others, are going to be grown up, and they're going to be able to do some really useful things.
There was a country in South America that has finally, who it is, right? Accepted Bitcoin or crypto as payment, right?
Yes.
And that is going to give it some credibility, I think, at some level. Is that right?
It is, and the status of crypto is disputed, depending upon whether you're in Japan, where it's completely legalized, or Turkey, where it's considered illegal.
Illegal, yeah.
In the U.S., it's a gray space where we don't know whether to consider it a currency, a commodity, or an equity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we're still trying to figure it out here. I actually have some concerns about Bitcoin going 5 to 10 years out, because it's energy inefficient. If you look at the energy costs of maintaining that network, it consumes more power than Ireland or Vietnam, entire countries. And you got to wonder if that's an effective use of our resources.
Is it sustainable? Right, long term.
Is it sustainable? There's kind of a funny story about this. You know, downtown we have an opera house, and the
Oh, yeah.
lights went dim, and they couldn't figure out why the lights were going dim all the time, and they figured out that there was a Bitcoin mining rig upstairs.
No kidding.
I turned that
No idea.
on,
Wow.
and it was such a power drain.
Wow.
So yeah.
Interesting. Another interesting thing about Bitcoin is that the ransomware that was just paid for the Colonial Pipeline.
Right, there was the clawback.
They got they found the money. They
Yes.
found the crypto.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you have to wonder, we're not going to find out how the FBI found it, but the fact that they found it.
Well, they had to send it somewhere.
Yeah.
And they had the address of where they sent it.
Right.
And I don't know if they even know who the owner of that account was.
Right.
But they found that account.
Yeah, they found that account.
And that's the thing with blockchain, is every transaction from the beginning is recorded. You know where that money came from and where it went to.
You know, you're talking about things that a lot of people are afraid of going forward, right? There are a lot of people that you look at. You have this conversation about Bitcoin or about crypto. You have this conversation about renewable energy. You have this conversation to people about, you know, whatever it might be, 5G, maybe the next level of
edge computing, whatever.
Exactly. And people are saying, oh, geez, it's too far out in the future. I'm a little worried about that. I'm not sure about cryptocurrency. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, but it's accelerating. It's coming here ahead of schedule.
Right.
You know, and if you look at the impact of COVID, I mean, it accelerated the movement to online retail by like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
It created whole new, you know, ways of looking at synthetic biology. I mean, the COVID vaccine by Moderna, right? You know, those are synthetic molecules that they're using for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could sit here, and I am not joking. I've been doing this for 4.5 years. I could talk to you all day about this. You are just so fascinating to me. And
oh, it's tons of fun. Yeah.
What's that?
Tons of fun. Yeah.
It is. It is. You're inspiring. Who inspires you, Jim?
Yeah, Alvin Toffler. He was really the first person to make futures a thing. Before that, I didn't even know it was a job description.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember reading his book Future Shock, you know, back in like 1980, and I thought, this is pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
And he was just dead on with so many things. Really remarkable.
Yeah.
Alvin and his wife Heidi both wrote that book.
Wow, incredible. It's been a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Look into that camera. Tell everyone how to get in touch with you, please.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Jim Lee, www.stratfi.com. Email address is jlee@stratfi.com. We also have a free monthly newsletter which covers the intersection between foresight and finance called The Forward View. If you log onto the site, you can sign up for that as well if you wish.
Awesome. All right, Foresight Investing by Jim Lee, complete guide to finding your next great trade, probably the last investment book you'll ever need, right? All right, my friend, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Jim. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for Rainmaker's Roundup. Please take a look at Jim and go to Amazon, buy his book. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good week, everyone. Be safe out there.